Every year, as part of the draft process, certain guys will start to set themselves as a cut above the rest. You'll start to really be able to identify early in the process, perhaps even years ahead of time, who are going to be those elite, top-of-the-run prospects for the NFL draft. And now that we're in the heart of the NFL draft season, the Senior Bowl's in the books, we start looking forward to the scouting combine. You know, those guys really start to set themselves above the pack, a cut above the rest. And one of those guys for the 2016 NFL draft, I think, has to be Laremy Tunsil, the 6'5", 305-pound junior offensive tackle from Ole Miss. Most certainly fits into that category of a guy that's been a presumptive top 5 pick for at least 2, if not 3 years now. He was the #1 offensive tackle recruit in 2013. 3 years later, he looks like he could potentially be the real deal. But what is the big deal about this guy? For some of you that aren't that familiar with his game, what makes Laremy Tunsil such a top-flight prospect and viewed almost unanimously as a top 3 or 5 pick in this 2016 NFL draft? Well, let's take a look at the strengths of his game and what he brings to the table as a talent and as a prospect. I'll start off with his feet. And when you're trying to project left tackles at the NFL level, and it's such an important position, in theory, you look at the feet and you look at the ability to move and the ability to be able to fend off those speed rushers from the outside. Well, I can tell you this much, based off of the film of the past 3 years, Laremy Tunsil has plenty of enough footwork to be able to stick at left tackle at a high level at the NFL level. Not only does he do a good job with his feet in terms of positioning his body and keeping his balance and maintaining his leverage, in my opinion, consistently, he also demonstrates a really nice lateral agility to be able to move out of his stance in a way where he keeps his pad level really, really good. He's a guy that can sit there and in a lot of cases be able to fend off even the most explosive of edge rushers on the outside with that footwork, with that lateral agility and natural athleticism for a guy that's 305 pounds. I mean, even at 305, he's not a giant monster, but that's still a big dude, and it can be hard to get all that weight moving in one direction the way you need to, how quickly you need to, and Tunsil consistently demonstrated that ability to me in his 3 years at Ole Miss. I also really like his natural second-level athleticism. You know, you're talking about a guy that's going to play on the offensive line. You need a guy that can get downfield and he can make that key block. He can seal that linebacker. He can blow up that safety that's coming in for run support. A guy that you could deploy on pulls, deploy on sweeps and misdirections and counters and traps and all these things. You'll have no problem being able to do all of those things with Laremy Tunsil as a left tackle. So if you're a coach, if you're an offensive line coach, an offensive coordinator, a head coach, you've got to love that skill set, that athleticism, that natural ability that he brings to the table because it increases what you could do on the offensive side of the ball. I also like his blocking awareness. I feel like Tunsil has a really good feel for where the blitz is coming, who his responsibility should be. Like, just because a guy's lined up on him doesn't mean that that's really the guy that he needs to take. Sometimes it might be more important for him to take the guy on the inside that's blitzing or take the guy on the outside that's blitzing. To me, in general, he showed a pretty good awareness in terms of blocking recognition and defensive recognition in terms of what his responsibilities were. He was very smooth in that way, and I didn't see him get caught with his figurative pants down a lot over the past couple of years. I really like his ability to seal block too, and I know this kind of seems simple, but when Tunsil gets somebody going in a certain direction or tries to wall them off, he walls them off consistently. He seals his hole. He seals his gap, if you will. So he's a guy that can hold up. He's a guy that can be effective in the running game because he can, if anything else, seal off the guy and give a bit of a path, give a bit of an alley. He can seal somebody off to the outside and push them past the play. He can push somebody inside to take them out of the play and break down the defense's containment on the outside, on the defensive line. I really like that skill that he has. And I really like, in terms of his body and in terms of his mechanics and his fundamentals, he really keeps a nice, consistent knee bend. He really, really does. This kind of, I guess, goes in part with the fundamentals of his footwork that are also really, really good. But his knee bend, he's able to keep consistent leverage. He's not a guy that I envision getting blown up a lot by bull rushers at the NFL level because, in large part, of his ability to maintain his leverage, to get low, to stay low consistently, not get upright, not get off balance. And those are some really, really good skills to have if you're trying to envision somebody being a blindside protector at the NFL level. And again, athletically, Tunsil looks like he has everything you possibly want and so much more out of a blindside protector for the next decade or 12 years to come. Now, with that said, no prospect is perfect. And I don't think Tunsil's as perfect as some people have made him out to be. It's a little bit harder to find flaws in his game as opposed to other prospects. I'll give you that. But there are still flaws there. And the thing is, for me with Tunsil, it's not that he has a ton of flaws. It's just that some of the flaws he has, the few that he has, to me are big flaws. First, I look at his power in the run-blocking game. Like I talked about, he's got good second-level athleticism. He does an effective job of being able to seal off his man in the direction that he needs to for the benefit of the offense, in particular in the running game. But this is not a guy that's going to pancake a lot of people. This is not a guy that's going to physically impose his will and push defenders back on their heels. So this is a guy that at times in the running game could be kind of statuesque just in the sense of he's holding up more than blocking through somebody. So you get up against somebody that's bigger or stronger, like you're playing potentially if you get drafted by Tennessee and you go #1 overall, just to give you an example. This is a guy that's going to be facing potentially J.J. Watt at times twice a year. He's going to be facing, think about that for a second. He's going to be facing off against guys like J.J. Watt twice a year. He's going to be facing off against somebody like a Henry Anderson for the Indianapolis Colts twice a year. Guys like that could potentially really wreak some havoc on him in terms of being able to get up under him in the running game. And that's a concern. At 305 pounds, he's got enough size to play left tackle, but he does need to get bigger and he does need to get stronger to be a more effective power drive run blocker. And then I also have some concern just in general tying back into the strength. I talk again about that bulk and strength to be able to handle those bull rushes. He's not a guy that I think is going to get troubled by it consistently. To be fair to him, sitting there and worrying about how he's going to block somebody like a J.J. Watt. You can say that about any offensive tackle, even the best of the best offensive tackles in the National Football League today. So maybe it's a little bit unfair, but he isn't going to be potentially, if he gets drafted #1 by Tennessee, in a division where he's going to have to face that guy at moments, even if J.J. Watt plays on the other end of the field, he's still going to have to face him at times twice a year, every single year, for years to come. So you have some real concerns with that lack of real mauling strength. Is he a guy that could get at times bull rushed in the passing game? Now again, because of his footwork, because of his knee bend, I don't envision that being as much of a problem as it would be for others that didn't have the same technique, didn't have the same mechanics and fundamentals in their pass blocking set. But that could still be at times an issue that could occasionally pop up, especially if he allows somebody to get some steam and some momentum heading into him, because all the technique in the world sometimes can't beat sheer strength and power. In terms of the actual game film over the past few years, there's one game that really concerned me. It was this year. He's coming right back off of suspension. It was the Auburn game. And I thought Carl Lawson took him to fucking school and ate his lunch. It looked like he got into Tunsil's head. Tunsil had a couple of bad false start penalties, a few times where he was clearly holding Lawson, and Lawson still got some consistent edge rush on Chad Kelly, the Ole Miss quarterback. And I look at him, and maybe it's in part a testament to if Carl Lawson could ever stay healthy, the type of dominant force he could be as an edge rusher in college and at the NFL level. It maybe speaks to his prospects in the 2017 draft class. Again, if he's able to stay healthy, just how explosive and potentially game-changing of an edge rusher he could be. But what happens for a guy like Tunsil if he gets one of those edge rushers like a Von Miller or DeMarcus Ware, somebody of that ilk, a Clay Matthews or whatever the case might be, one of those truly great 3-4 outside linebacking edge rushers that are able to get at him early, they're able to get some pressure early. Is it going to be a situation where they start getting in Tunsil's head and Tunsil's mechanics and his fundamentals start to break down, his footwork starts to go to shit, he starts to reach with his hands? That's something else you notice occasionally with him. He didn't always get his body in the best position at times, especially it seemed like maybe when he got a little fatigued later in the game, he would start to sit there and get a little reachy and a little grabby. Is this a guy that could have a propensity, especially early on in his career, if a guy gets in his head, to be flagged for a couple of really bad holding calls? That's one of the most devastating penalties you could have as an offense is holding, because it gives you that tease a lot of times of that big play, but it all comes back and you end up getting a 10-yard penalty on top of that. And seeing that Carl Lawson game, that Auburn game, that gave me a little pause. I'm like, ooh. It's not to completely erase all the great strengths that Tunsil has in his game, but I think it's a concern. I look at his injury history, too. I don't think people are talking about this enough. Maybe it's because he's not a quarterback. Maybe it's because he's not, let's say, a running back or a wide receiver. I don't really know. But this is a guy that had a partially torn bicep in 2014, fractured his fibula, I believe it was back in the bowl game in 2014, Those are multiple serious or semi-serious injuries in the course of a year. Now, he stayed pretty healthy throughout 2015, but he only played about half the season. So you're talking about investing a top 3 pick, maybe even the #1 overall pick, in a guy, in particular, an offensive tackle at that. Do you really want to have that type of injury history on the resume? I don't know. I think the medicals are going to be a little more important for a guy like Tunsil than people think. Because that history is there, and you're going to have to feel confident that this is a guy that's going to be able to hold up at the NFL level. And maybe in part that comes back to the lack of real power and big-time strength on his 305-pound frame. But the one other thing that really surprises me is for some of the other prospects we talk about in terms of off-the-field issues, like I've talked about it a lot with his teammate at Ole Miss, Robert Nkemdiche. Tunsil's got some red flags there, too. He's got some issues there, too. You got that domestic violence allegation with him supposedly lashing out and hitting his stepfather because his stepfather was arguing with his mom. Some people might sit there and say, hey, he was defending his mom. That's what you're going to do. Yeah, but that could also speak to poor judgment. That could speak to bad decision-making. And what happens if he's in another situation where maybe somebody's going after one of his friends? Is he going to sit there and do the same type of thing? Could he get into some type of trouble? I don't think that's something you could instantly dismiss. On top of the fact that you're talking about a guy that was suspended for a little over half of Ole Miss's season in 2015 at a time where they're a team that's thinking about possibly, especially once they had beaten Alabama, possibly contending for a national championship, arguably the best player that they had wasn't on the field because of the allegations, and more than allegations, the provable facts of him accepting impermissible benefits according to the NCAA. Now, look, we can go on this big tangent about the NCAA and the rules and the bylaws and the hypocrisy of all that, and I'm not going to dispute that. However, though, it does come down to the fundamental question of Laremy Tunsil and his judgment and his decision-making, knowing that these are things that you can't do, knowing that at some point in time you're probably going to get paid a lot of money, but you could potentially be putting yourself and your program at risk, your eligibility at risk, your team's chances of winning big games at risk because of your lack of availability, because of doing something like this, and he did it anyways. Now, maybe for every guy that's caught, there's 50 that don't get caught, and I get that, and he's a big-name guy, so it's going to increase the magnificity, or magnification, excuse me, if you will. I almost had a W moment there. The magnification of the scope that he is viewed under, but again, that judgment is very important. NFL teams want to know that you can rely on these guys. And I think just like with quarterback, any other position, offensive tackle is just one of them. The single best ability that you could bring to a team is availability. And if you're wondering if Laremy Tunsil is going to get himself suspended or he's going to make bad decisions, are you really willing to spend the #1 overall pick or a top 3 pick on this guy? In terms of an NFL comparison, I will go with Tyron Smith of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, to me, Tunsil is a far superior prospect coming out of Ole Miss than Tyron Smith was coming out of USC in the 2011 draft. So this is not necessarily a comparison in terms of where they were at in terms of prospect levels. And that's not the case whatsoever. No. I'm talking about more so, and I almost went with Lane Johnson here because I thought that would be somewhat appropriate, but I'll go with Tyron Smith because I'm talking about projecting what he could be at the NFL level. And I see two guys that are really, really good athletes, really, frankly, great athletes at their position with all the footwork and lateral agility and second-level athleticism you would want out of a franchise left tackle. You look at Tyron Smith, and he got paid all that money, and he's proved himself over the years to be worth it for the Dallas Cowboys. You're looking at Laremy Tunsil, you see that type of ability to be that same type of guy. Again, the footwork, the agility, the athleticism, those are the names of the game. Those are the calling cards. There are some things that need to be worked on. Most importantly, though, for a guy like Tunsil, similar to Tyron Smith when he's coming to the NFL level, Smith was all of like 295 pounds coming out of USC. The guys need to get stronger. They need to get bigger. And that's going to be very important. Tunsil's going to have to get stronger. He's going to have to maybe put on another 10 pounds of muscle or so. And he needs to get stronger and get better. Overall, though, like I said, with Tunsil, he's one of those guys that he has the best athleticism that I've seen in some time at that left tackle position coming out of college. I mean, he has everything that you want from a pure athletic standpoint. Personally, to me, I believe that he could be trusted to be a blindside protector on an island in the NFL for the next 10 to 12 years. Adding strength is going to be the key, and I think that both his medical history and his character are going to need to be investigated a lot more than I personally would be able to do, which can kind of skew my rating here a little bit one way or another. But it'll be very important for NFL teams to do so. You're talking about out of Jump Street, giving this guy $20 million plus of guaranteed money because of where he's going to be potentially picked. Then 3-4 years down the road, you're talking about giving him a contract extension where you're probably going to be giving him $60 million north in guaranteed money. This is a dude that's going to make a lot of money potentially over the years, or he could. But do you want to risk it? You need to make sure that before you risk it, you make sure that the dough on the biscuit is good, if you know what I mean. I think to me, he's the best pure left tackle prospect that I've seen since Joe Thomas in 2007, and I mean that. I mean, he's the real deal. He should be a top 3 pick in this draft for all intents and purposes. He's probably going to potentially go number 1 overall. And again, if the Titans or somebody else took him number 1 overall, whoever has that pick on April 28th when the draft begins, number 1 overall, if they took Tunsil, I wouldn't knock him too bad. Now, for me, he's not the number 1 player on my board because, again, you've got that injury history, but more importantly, those off-field concerns. He's not as clean as I would like to say that a guy is a number 1 overall talent. But, instead of number 1, maybe he's number 3 or 4 on my board. That's no slide on him because I think he's a guy that'll, in his career, play 12, 13 years. He'll make the Pro Bowl 8 or 9 times, probably be a 3 or 4 time All-Pro. He's a guy that could potentially be talked about someday as a borderline Hall of Famer. So I'm really big on Tunsil's NFL potential. It's just, like I said to me, I am frankly a little surprised that people don't talk about some of those questions about his injury history and especially off the field, because I wonder if it was another position, if we'd be talking about them a whole lot more. And frankly, even looking at one of his teammates, that's a huge emphasis and a huge talking point. I wonder why Tunsil's going off basically scot-free on this. I find that very interesting. But a top-flight prospect, he most certainly is in this draft.